Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on this 18th of September. You're watching Alaska Weather from the National Weather Service here in Alaska, and we welcome you to call the Alaska Weather Information Line anytime you need to check on your forecast. You're looking out 24 hours or a whole week ahead. You want to get a sense of the weather. 1-800-472-0391 is the number to keep handy by the phone. And if you don't have it on your home screen yet of your mobile device or your tablet, try this, mobile.weather.gov. It's a mobile-friendly version of weather.gov/Alaska. And once you punch in your village or your location, you can save that to your home screen and go back to it really quickly. It's low bandwidth friendly and has links to satellite and radar pictures across Alaska and as well as your current observations. So helpful stuff to have at your fingertips there. If you can't find what you're looking for, feel free to email me anytime. I love getting email from your part of Alaska and seeing your pictures. Let us know how we can be of better service. And of course, if there's something on the show that you like, hate, or otherwise. And of course, maybe we'll get your picture of your village on the show. So make sure you send me a pic of what it looks like where you are in Alaska. Here's a look at hazardous weather across the region tonight. We're mainly talking about cold and dry weather. So if we're talking about hazardous weather in this case, it's generally going to be about getting colder than it ought to be, or perhaps something that could damage your plants. And once again, for Yakutat, Cake, Wrangell, and Petersburg, we're looking at the potential of frost, just as we were last night. And in this case, frost advisory for tonight and early tomorrow morning is expected for the potential of damaging frost, not a killing freeze just yet. But the potential is there for frost on your plants. So if you didn't bring the plants in last night and they're okay, tonight might be a good night to try that again. Bring the plants inside if you can. And if they're not plants that want to go inside, get a cloth, something breathable, and hang it up over the tops of those plants so that they can continue to breathe. You don't want to smother them or choke them out with plastic wrap. But certainly try and keep them a little bit on the warmer side, and maybe they'll be okay, at least for another couple days there until we get some colder air in place. Now, for the rest of you in Southeast, you're wondering, where's our frost advisory, right? It's certainly just as cold as it is down the road. You've already had your killing freeze. So if you've had a killing freeze, you don't get another frost advisory. So the frost, again, already been an issue for your area, and no longer get a frost advisory after that moment has passed. So after we get out of this stretch here, we won't have any more frost advisories for most of Southeast going forward. So there you go. That's how frost and freeze advisories work. For Tuesday's satellite picture across the region, we are still looking at a brutal area of high pressure that just won't quit. Because of that, we're getting a healthy south flow across the central and western chain. We're still getting very tame weather across most of south central and southwest, and we're getting very dry weather across southeast and south central. Where's all the weather going? Well, that is making it through this ridge is being pushed across the central and northern interior and the north slope, and that's where weather wave after weather wave keeps traveling through. And we have high pressure that is in command right now of the Arctic, so everything that's moving in from west to east is kind of having to sneak right up through the Yukon Valley and then work its way around the ridge. It's a pretty impressive weather system that just won't quit. And because of that, we've had well, certainly record-breaking dry weather across parts of south central, and certainly an unusual stretch of dry weather for southeastern Alaska. A lot of, so much dry weather, in fact, that the forecasters that have been at the Alaska National Weather Service offices and just about every one of our locations, Juneau, Anchorage, Fairbanks, and even beyond, are having a really hard time remembering when it has been this dry for this part of the year, which is normally our wettest part of the year. So this is certainly an impressive weather pattern, and one that will continue to be looked at after we get out of this weather pattern and into something more normal. Here's a look at the weather map now. High pressure is in charge across the middle Yukon Valley. That's sitting around 1,027 millibars. We've got plenty of cloud cover under this. This is what we would call a dirty ridge. A clean ridge would be something where you have just wall-to-wall sunshine, of course, or clear skies. Across the central chain, 1,027 millibar high sitting there, and a lot of low clouds and stratus. IFR and MVFR is going to be in charge out across the Bering and the west coast really for the next 2 to 3 days. You'll see that in the aviation forecast coming up. We've got a boundary here across the western chain, and ahead of that, notice how the pressure gradient is starting to pack in a little bit more. We're going to get a healthy southerly flow, probably some decent gales coming in across the western chain in the next 24 hours. A look across the Gulf shows low pressure sitting here just south and west of the Dixon entrance and outside of Port Alexander, getting clouds more than anything else over southeast and maybe some showers in the region tonight, but again, nothing too widespread or spectacular. Showers continue across the Alaska Range, probably over Kodiak Island, maybe across the Kenai Fjords region. Into the interior, Norton Sound, Kotzebue Sound. Around Kotzebue Sound, there's an opportunity as a stronger weather system passes overhead. We might get enough instability for some showers and thunderstorms. We were talking about that a little bit yesterday. The same pattern is still with us as this wave is working its way through. Nothing too strong, but if you hear some thunder or see some lightning, that's probably what's going on. Now, the front will work its way across the Bering. Notice how it's going to start to pinch off this region of rainfall as it works from west to east. As high pressure drops a little bit further south, the rain will continue to work its way through. That weak disturbance sitting across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta will gradually kind of fade away, and we'll be left with the frontal boundary across the Alcan border in the North Slope. That's where all the cold air is. If you're wondering, well, don't we normally have kind of a push of colder air this time of the year? Yeah, we do. But it's sliding off to the east and southeast away from Alaska, so we're left with a warm and mild air coming in over the Bering Sea, out of the Pacific originally, and all riding up and over this ridge of high pressure that's still anchored just south of the Aleutians. We still have a disturbance here just south and west of Haida Gwaii, and that is still trying to slosh some clouds up into southern southeast, not being terribly effective at it. And then out across the west, low pressure sitting across the northern Pacific will scoot in here fairly quickly. High pressures drop to the south here, and this will be a temporary thing. And notice again the pressure gradient is packing in there. That means gales working across the central chain in this case and probably working quickly eastward. Rainfall will spread out across St. Paul and St. George, heading up towards St. Matthew. But even the ridge down to the south is still controlling the weather up here across the northern Bering. Pretty impressive stuff. And low pressure across the interior just dragging a very slow-moving disturbance across the interior, enough to keep clouds and showers focused around it, and fog across the North Slope and the Chukchi Coast as we go. The cold air still locked off to the north and east, still looking at dry air across northern parts of the Gulf and parts of central and northern southeast, and that means that even through Thursday morning there could be a potential for frost in some parts of our villages there in southeast, while those in south central and southwest, a little more cloud cover, slightly milder weather, and not as much of a risk for that cold snap there, especially what we'll see under the clear sky up and down the Alcan border. That's a look at your Thursday. Let's take a look at temperatures then for tonight and early tomorrow morning. 30s and 40s, no surprise then. Yakutat getting close to 34 degrees. Those in those frost advisories again would be Yakutat, Petersburg, Wrangell, and Cake, and you're looking at temperatures that are in that zone of 30 to about 35 degrees. Sitka closer to 41. Ketchikan and Annette mid to upper 40s there. Looks like Haines and Skagway also in the upper 30s. Cordova about 37, lower to mid 40s for many across the Cook Inlet region, up and down the Kenai Peninsula as well. Kodiak Island, try 48 degrees. Mid 40s for most around the Tanana Valley, though Fairbanks you could be looking at about 39, 32 around Fort Yukon. 20s and 30s for the North Slope. Utqiagvik about 33 degrees. While Prudhoe Bay, Dead Horse, Atkasuk probably in the upper 20s tonight. 45 around Nome. The YK Delta will cool off into the lower to mid 40s. Nunivak Island though, Macoriac, you're looking at about 47. Pretty close to what you'll see in Gamble and Savunga as well, and St. Paul and St. George. And closer to 50 degrees for most of the Alaska Peninsula and the central and western chain. Overnight, lows will quickly rebound for many, especially where we have more sunshine. 50s and 60s for southeast, closer to 60 in south central and Kodiak Island, low to mid 50s for the middle Tanana Valley and eastern interior, a little bit milder, 50 in Fort Yukon, closer to 40 for the North Slope tomorrow. Kotzebue Sound, including Shishmaref, about 48, 51 in Kotzebue, lower 50s for Nome and Unalakleet, 53 around Galena, southwest, King Salmon, Dillingham, a little bit closer to 60 degrees. Morning temperatures on Thursday will be back in the upper 20s to lower 40s for many across southeast. Some of your cool spots like Gustavus may be a little bit chilly. 30s and 40s for Prince William Sound, closer to 40 degrees for Cook Inlet, about 40 in Fairbanks, 29 for Arctic Village, low 30s for the North Slope. Southwest back in the mid 40s and high temperatures on Thursday, pretty much close to 60 in south central and 30s up north.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to your aviation weather now. Widespread NBFR conditions are expected across all of the Bering, most of the west coast, and a large part of the interior as we go into your Wednesday morning. We're also going to see hit and miss IFR across parts of south central, including over the Kenai Peninsula and Turdagain Arm, and then up into the Talkeetnas. East of Prince William Sound and into southeastern Alaska, conditions should be generally VFR. Watch for hit and miss IFR across the Alaska Peninsula, the eastern and central chain, and really a large part of the west as well, especially over Kiska, until you get to the front. Now, one item of note, shower or thunderstorm activity is possible around Kotzebue Sound and the northern parts of the Seward Peninsula as we go into Wednesday. That threat's going to shift a little bit further eastward as we get into the afternoon. We've got a broad area of low pressure that we were talking about earlier that is going to allow a little extra lift, but generally concentrated in this area. So if you get a flash of lightning or a little bit of a rumble of thunder out there, don't be surprised. But for aviation concerns, of course, that implies isolated but poor visibility and possibly isolated severe turbulence or isolated severe icing. So keep that in mind if you're flying through places in and around Galena, let's say, by the afternoon tomorrow. MVFR conditions will be fairly widespread, generally north and west of the Alaska Range up into the Kobuk and Noatak valleys, the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range until about Fairbanks and Chicken, let's say, and then generally east up and down the Alcan all the way out towards southeast. VFR conditions expected there with IFR from St. Matthew to just west of the Pribilofs to Kiska and all the way out to Attu. For Thursday morning, IFR spreads eastward a little bit more into St. Paul and St. George, the Alaska Peninsula, parts of southwest, and then into the Killbuck Hills and west of the Alaska Range. Again, an opportunity for some convection there inside of Norton Sound with MVFR conditions all the way up through the Brooks Range, Chukchi Coast, and then also spreading into the Gulf of Alaska. Southeast remains VFR through Thursday afternoon. You'll notice the areas of IFR improve as we get into Thursday, but MVFR should stay pretty packed in all the way across the Kobuk and Noatak into Unalakleet and parts of the Middle Yukon Valley, through parts of the Tanana Valley, and also through South Central and the Susitna Valley, with areas out west still holding on to IFR, generally west of Adak. So quite a bit going on out in the west. Here's your pass conditions then. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass, we expect to see IFR to start the day with some improvements toward MVFR as we go. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass should follow suit. IFR conditions expected in the morning with some general improvement for Rainy Pass as well. Windy Pass expected to end up in a marginal state as we get into the afternoon. Isabel Pass looking at marginal ceilings and visibility as the afternoon moves through. Mentasta Pass also expected to be marginal most of your day. Tanita Pass looking for IFR conditions to start your Wednesday, marginal conditions as the afternoon goes on. Portage Pass holds at a marginal level. And Chilkoot and White Pass look pretty good the next couple days, still looking at VFR both Wednesday and Thursday. For freezing levels, that colder air still lingers across the north and east. Generally speaking, to the west and south, conditions warm up to about 6,000 to 8,000 feet for most locations. You get up a little bit north of the Alaska Range, and we're going to talk about levels that are below 4,000 feet over Kotzebue Sound in the northern parts of the Seward Peninsula. And then out west, you have to go way out across the western chain to get up above about 10,000 feet. Most of southeast also hovering at or above 6,000 feet for your Wednesday morning. Icing potential is there. Those levels are coming down just a little bit. The amount of moisture available for icing potential is certainly there. And we're going to call that level between about 9,000 and 10,000 feet for most of the interior, and it kind of falls off as you get south of Prince William Sound and out of the Susitna Valley. For southern parts of southeast, also looking at an area here that's kind of high up there over the Dixon entrance and just south of Port Alexander for the most part, generally above 10,000 feet. Our jet stream shows low pressure west of the Kamchatka Peninsula, a pretty steady southwesterly flow, riding up and over a ridge of high pressure across the North Pacific. Northerlies coming down the west coast, and then our trough feeding in moisture across the Pacific Northwest. Really not much of a change in the last couple days. We're going to see this ridge of high pressure move eastward with time, so it's going to start to change our pattern up a little bit more. More of a northerly outflow wind across south central, southerly winds across the interior, sweeping in moisture that's moving out over the Bering. Wind speeds around 20 to 30 knots by and large for the most part. 45 to 55 knots out across the southwest, and you'll see faster wind speeds there at 3,000 feet as well. Northerly offshore winds blowing over southeast, most of south central looking at about 10 to 20 knot winds, and again a weak southerly flow up across the Brooks Range and the Seward Peninsula as well as the Kobuk and Noatak areas. For turbulence then, we're still focused on the same spots. Generally some isolated to considerable moderate across the central and western chain, and some isolated chop across southwest and the Alaska Peninsula as we go through your Wednesday.
On March 11, 2011, a 9.0 magnitude earthquake off the Pacific coast of Japan generated a tsunami. This series of ocean waves sped towards the island nation, with waves reaching 24 feet high. The result was devastation and utter destruction. Towns were engulfed by water and swept away. Farmland was flooded. Tens of thousands of lives were lost. The National Police Agency reported damages to hundreds of roads, bridges, and more than 100,000 buildings. The surging water flooded rivers and destroyed harbors. In some areas along the coast, tsunami waves reached 6 miles inland. Tsunamis not only cause severe damage when they first strike land, but also as the water recedes back to sea. Tsunamis can inflict this type of damage because of some unique features. As tsunami waves travel across ocean basins, they may be as little as a few centimeters high, but they extend down to the ocean floor. This is different than traditional waves, which are only surface features. Tsunamis can also travel hundreds of miles per hour in the open ocean. As these waves approach a coast, the shallowing ocean floor slows the waves down and pushes the water mass upwards. The quicker the ocean floor transitions from deep to shallow, the greater potential for a higher wave height. So, tsunamis that experience this sudden shift into shallow water can have the height and momentum to pack a serious punch. Unfortunately, Japan found itself in this scenario. This image shows how abruptly the Japanese islands rise out of the ocean. Other coastal areas in the region have much more gradual slopes. The earthquake on March 11th was the most powerful known to hit Japan, and the tsunami it created had the necessary ingredients to make it such a deadly and destructive force. "80 miles east of Japan, a 9.0 magnitude earthquake rocks the ocean floor. This disturbance causes a transfer of energy from the seafloor to the ocean, generating a series of ocean waves, known as a tsunami. In about 20 minutes, waves strike the Japanese coastline. Other nations go on high alert because the tsunami will propagate or spread throughout the Pacific Ocean. As the tsunami radiates outward from Japan, it encounters a variety of ocean features, such as ridges and underwater volcanoes, which guide the tsunami and create a complex pattern of scattering and reflective waves. In 8 hours, the waves reach the Hawaiian Islands, and in 9.5 hours, they hit the west coast of the United States. In 16 hours, the tsunami reaches the Indian Ocean and New Zealand, and by 22 hours, the entire Pacific Ocean had been affected. The impact of a tsunami can be highly variable because of the complicated interactions with ocean features and coastline elements. Wave height and speed will differ from place to place. Since tsunamis can be hundreds of miles long and travel thousands of miles away from where they originated, they are considered a worldwide threat when they form. These are the sounds of a tsunami warning. They alert residents that a killer wave is about to strike. These sirens, however, are just a small part of the sophisticated warning systems that played a role in Japan and in the US during the Pacific Ocean tsunami in March 2011. Most tsunamis are generated by an undersea earthquake. Fortunately, Japan has one of the most advanced earthquake early warning systems in the world. It detects tremors, calculates the epicenter, and sends out warnings from over 1,000 seismographs scattered throughout the country. The Japan Meteorological Agency issues the warnings and sends alerts to television and radio channels, the internet, and mobile phone networks. When the earthquake struck 80 miles offshore, warnings were generated in about 3 seconds. The tsunami warnings came 3 minutes later. These take longer because more complex calculations are involved and must factor in ocean data. Since the first tsunami wave struck the coastline within 20 minutes, the advanced warning provided some residents with crucial minutes to reach a safe area. While the earthquake sent powerful tsunami waves westward toward Japan, the tsunami also propagated east into the Pacific Ocean. Here, warnings are issued by the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, operated by NOAA in Hawaii. NOAA maintains a large network of buoys with ocean floor sensors that are strategically positioned in the earthquake-prone zones of the Pacific. This system collects vital ocean data for tsunami forecasting. On March 11th, only 25 minutes after the earthquake struck, the first buoy station measured the tsunami and relayed information to Hawaii. Scientists used this data to run models and issue forecasts and warnings to nations throughout the Pacific. From there, local emergency managers decided what actions were appropriate to take for public safety. The earthquake and resulting tsunami devastated the Japanese coastline, causing damage that will take years to repair. While we can't prevent these forces of nature from happening, our early warning systems can help us prepare for the dangers headed our way.
And now, marine weather around Alaska. Under marine weather now and the sea ice update, you'll notice that pack ice and the thicker concentrations, they're colored in white. The areas of ice that are in concentrations above 80% are really shrinking there as we're getting close to, if not past or on our sea ice minimum. We're continuing to see melting out here in the Chukchi, but we're starting to see growth here along this north and eastern edge. Now, of course, the ice continues well off to the east and to the north. We don't analyze this area here across Canada's waters as much, but we're really concerned about this area here. And again, we're starting to see more ice growth up to the north and moving southward. So things are changing, things are getting colder, and ice is growing. And this will eventually fill in here in the coming weeks here as the temperatures get colder and colder heading into October. For the very latest sea ice information, head to weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. Here's a look at the marine forecast now for southeastern Alaska. Winds are going to stay pretty light. Because of those light winds, that's exactly why we're talking about frost advisories again for Yakutat, Petersburg, Wrangell, and Cake as we head into tonight. So watch out for those plants, even if you've got them on the deck of the boat. Northwesterlies across the outer coast about 10 knots. You're looking at about 3 to 4 foot seas as we go into the morning hours. 2 to 3 foot seas up north. Lynn Canal a little bit more on the breezy side. Clarence Strait not so much. 5 foot seas, 5 knot winds, and 2 foot seas, I should say. Thursday, light winds blowing out of the north, if that, 5 to 10 knots. You're looking at about 3 foot seas there and 2 foot seas on the inside. Looks like a really calm day on Thursday in the inside passage. Only 5 to 10 knot winds there from the north and northwest. Nice day. In Prince William Sound, 10 knots. Northwesterlies around 2 foot seas expected. 3 to 4 foot seas across the northern Gulf. Light winds for most of Cook Inlet. West and northwesterlies over the Barrens with a 4 foot sea and a 20 knot wind as we get into Thursday. Still looking at about 15 to 20 across the Barrens. 4 foot seas there. Light winds blowing in from the southwest for Cook Inlet. Easterlies inside of Prince William Sound, a light 2 foot sea expected there, and southwesterlies across the northern Gulf. Again, 10 knots and 3 foot seas. For Bristol Bay, northwesterlies with a 15 knot wind, 4 foot seas there. Northwesterly winds coming off of Kodiak Island. Looking at about 3 to 4 foot seas coming down the north and western Gulf and into the Alaska Peninsula's Pacific coast. For Thursday, a little bit of a stronger wind develops. Remember, we're watching that tighter pressure gradient out west. You'll see the results of that in a minute, but over the Alaska Peninsula, already picking up some of those faster moving winds, 15 to 20 knots and 4 to 5 foot seas in most areas. Southwesterlies at 20 inside of Shelikof Strait. Now, here's where that tighter pressure gradient was. A south and southwesterly wind over the central and western chain. That gets us 20 to 25 knots with 6 to 11 foot seas. A little bit more of a west-northwesterly flow right around the vicinity of that ridge between Nikolsky and Unalaska for your Wednesday. As we get into Thursday, look at that. Southerly is coming up to 40 knots, 35 to 25 knots the further east you go. 8 to 10 knots in most areas, or 8 to 10 feet, I should say, in most areas. Once you get west of Atka, seas are going to be around 15 to 17 feet on that sharper southerly wind. So be prepared for that on Thursday. For Friday, this is going to slide eastward. So again, some changes coming there. As we get into Wednesday, south and westerly winds across the YK Delta, 15 to 20 knots expected with 4 to 5 foot seas, 11 foot seas around St. Matthew, 6 foot seas for St. Paul and St. George. As we get into Thursday, west and southwesterlies diminish just a little bit more. There's 7 foot seas in many locations from Amonach all the way down toward Macoriac and St. Paul and St. George. Generally 15 to 20 knot winds, and you'll see a little bit of a lesser wind inside of Norton Sound, 10 knots with 2 foot seas there coming in. For the Beaufort Seacoast, easterlies will be strong tomorrow, anywhere from 20 to 35 knots, 6 to 7 foot seas in the open waters. But look at the Chukchi Sea, not that bad. South and easterly winds around 10 knots and 2 to 3 foot seas for your Wednesday. As we get into Thursday, not much of a change out here across the Chukchi at all. Light winds around Utqiagvik and Point Barrow, and a southeasterly flow, a little bit stronger as you get out toward Kaktovik, 30 knots and 6 foot seas for Thursday. Recapping tonight's weather, showers are certainly possible across the interior. We've seen hit and miss showers pretty much all day long. Galena picked up about a quick about a quarter inch or so of rain in the last 24 hours. Most areas aren't seeing anywhere close to that. We do have a front moving across the western Bering. That's going to bring the winds up a little bit more across the central and western chain, as we just saw on the marine charts. You can always check those out at weather.gov/Anchorage/TV. Showers will continue across the interior and southwest as we get into Thursday. Dry weather continues for southeast, and because of light winds, dry weather, and colder nights, frost advisories have been issued for Yakutat, Petersburg, Wrangell, and Cake once again tonight and into early tomorrow morning. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.